It was 8 o'clock in the morning when I felt someone shaking my shoulders violently. I opened my eyes slowly, still caught in that limbo between sleep and waking, and saw my son Michael's face inches from mine. His eyes were wide, the veins in his neck standing out, and his voice sounded like a desperate shout that shot through my chest. "Give me the PIN for the card now, Mom. Jessica is at the dealership with your card and needs the PIN urgently." I blinked several times, confused, trying to process his words. My son never came to visit me this early. In fact, he hardly ever came. And now here he was, in my bedroom, screaming at me for a password while I could barely keep my eyes open. Something in his tone gave me a strange chill, but before I could ask anything, he shook me again. "Mom, please. It's urgent. I need the numbers now." Half asleep, still not fully understanding what was happening, I smiled slightly. It was an automatic reflex, something I always did when my children asked me for help. That's how I was taught to be. Always available, always willing, always the mom who fixes everything. So I murmured the 4 digits in a tired voice, dragging out each number as if it weighed a ton. 3, 7, 2, 9. Michael didn't even thank me. He ran out of my room, frantically dialing on his phone. And then, barely 3 seconds later, I heard a sharp, desperate scream coming from the device. It was Jessica's voice, my daughter-in-law, shrieking something I couldn't make out. Then came the silence. A thick, heavy silence that left me trembling in my bed. I stayed there, motionless, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. Something wasn't right. Something terrible had just happened. And I, without knowing it, had just been a part of it. But to understand how I got to that moment, to that instant where my own son woke me up screaming, demanding something I didn't even comprehend, I need to take you back in time. I need to tell you what my life was like before that Wednesday morning that changed everything. My name is Helen. I am 74 years old, and I live alone in a small house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It's a modest house, with 2 bedrooms, a yard I can't take care of like I used to, and walls that hold more than 40 years of memories. I raised my son Michael here. I lived here with my husband Robert until the day his heart stopped beating 3 years ago. Since then, this house feels too big and too quiet at the same time. My routine is simple. I get up at 7 o'clock, make coffee in the old coffee pot Robert gave me for our 20th anniversary, and I sit in the kitchen to watch the sunrise through the window. Afterwards, I do some light chores, watch my daytime TV shows, and in the afternoons, I go for a walk around the block if my knees allow it. I live on my Social Security checks and the savings Robert and I scraped together over a lifetime of honest work. It's not much, but it's enough. I've never been one for luxuries. I've never needed more than what I have. Or at least, that's what I thought. Michael is my only son. For years he was my pride, my reason for living. I raised him most of the time because Robert worked long hours to give us what we needed. I handled every homework assignment, every scraped knee, every nightmare. I was his mother and his best friend. When Robert died, I thought Michael would be closer to me. I thought we would support each other in our grief. But the exact opposite happened. He pulled away. The calls became more and more sporadic, the visits almost non-existent. And when he finally did show up, there was always a reason. He always needed something. At first, I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. Because when you're a mother, you have this terrible ability to justify everything your children do. He's busy, I told myself. He has his own life, his own world, and it was true. Michael had married Jessica 2 years ago, a 38-year-old woman who worked at an ad agency. I met her at the wedding, a small ceremony I was invited to almost as an obligation. I remember Jessica wore an elegant and expensive ivory-colored dress, too expensive for what I knew of Michael's salary. She had a perfect smile, but her eyes were cold. She shook my hand delicately, told me she was delighted to meet me, and then turned to talk to other guests. That was our entire interaction that day. Since then, every time I went to visit them, I felt like I was in the way. Jessica always had this assessing gaze, as if she were calculating how long I would stay or how much my presence was costing them. The first few months after the wedding were strange. Michael would call me once in a while, but the conversations were brief, awkward, as if he were in a hurry or distracted. I always ended those calls with a lump in my throat, wondering what I had done wrong, why my son seemed so distant. One day, I worked up the courage and went to visit him without calling first. I rang the doorbell of their condo, a modern place in an expensive part of town, and waited several minutes until Jessica opened the door. She was wearing yoga pants and a tank top, her hair pulled back in a high ponytail. She looked at me with surprise, though not the pleasant kind. It was more like annoyance. "Helen," she said with a forced smile, "we didn't know you were coming." "I wanted to surprise you," I replied, holding up a Tupperware of homemade cookies I had prepared that morning. "I thought we could have lunch together." Jessica looked at the container as if I were offering her something contaminated, but she finally stepped aside to let me pass. "Michael is working from home. He has an important conference call in 20 minutes. I walked into the condo and was stunned. Everything was white, minimalist, with furniture that looked like it came out of a design magazine. There was a huge flat-screen TV on the wall, a brand-new gaming console, and in the kitchen, gleaming stainless steel appliances that probably cost more than all the furniture in my house combined. I sat on the sofa, feeling out of place, while Jessica prepared tea with mechanical movements. She didn't offer me anything to eat. She didn't even open the container of cookies. When Michael came out of his home office, he greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek. "Mom, what a surprise. Is everything okay?" "Yes, dear. I just wanted to see you." The three of us sat there in that uncomfortable silence that feels like a weight on your chest. I tried to make conversation, asking about their work, their plans, but every answer was short, listless. Jessica checked her phone constantly, and Michael seemed anxious to get back to his computer. I stayed for barely 40 minutes. When I said goodbye, neither of them offered to walk me to the elevator. That was the first time I felt that something was deeply broken between us. But the worst hadn't even begun. Everything changed one afternoon in October, 3 months after that awkward visit. Michael called me, and for the first time in a long time, he sounded genuinely interested in talking to me. "Mom, how are you? I miss you so much." My heart swelled with happiness. "I miss you too, dear. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's perfect. Hey, Jessica and I were thinking about spending the weekend with you. It's been a long time since we spent time together." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I immediately started planning everything. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, bought special food, and even baked the chocolate cake Michael loved as a kid. When they arrived that Saturday, they were full of good vibes. Jessica even hugged me, something she had never done before. We had dinner, we laughed, we watched a movie. For the first time in years, I felt like I had my family back. But on Sunday morning, as I was making breakfast, Michael came into the kitchen with a serious expression. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important." I dried my hands on my apron and sat down at the table with him. "Of course, dear. Tell me. Jessica and I are going through a tough spot financially. I had some unexpected expenses at work, and she had to change agencies, so her salary went down temporarily. We need a small loan, just $1,500. We'll pay you back next month, guaranteed." I felt a pit in my stomach. It wasn't the amount that bothered me. It was the way. This whole weekend had been a setup. They came because they needed money, not because they missed me. But I looked into my son's eyes, those eyes I had watched grow up, that I had comforted 1,000 times, and I couldn't say no. "All right, Michael, I'll lend it to you." I went to the bank on Monday and withdrew the money. I gave it to him in cash, and he promised me that in 30 days I would have it back. 30 days passed, then 60, then 3 months. They never paid me back a single cent. And when I asked him about it on the phone, Michael got uncomfortable. "Mom, other expenses came up. Just give me a little more time." "But Michael, that money was part of my emergency savings." I know. I promise I'll pay you back soon. Please, don't pressure me." And that's how I learned I would never see that money again. But that was only the beginning. 2 months later, they called again. This time they needed $800 to repair Jessica's car. Then it was $600 to pay a fine. Then $500 to cover a credit card bill. Each time they came with a different excuse, with a promise to repay that was never kept. And every time I hesitated, Michael used the exact words he knew would disarm me. "Mom, you're the only person I can trust. You're the only one who's always been there for me." And I gave in. I always gave in. Because that's what mothers do, right? Sacrifice until they're empty. But there was something else that hurt me even more than the money. It was the way they treated me. When they needed something, they showed up with smiles and hugs. But as soon as they got what they wanted, they disappeared. They didn't call to see how I was. They didn't come to visit just for the pleasure of seeing me. I had become an emotional ATM, and the worst part of all is that I knew it. I knew it, and I still couldn't stop it. Because I was afraid of losing my son for good, afraid of being left completely alone in this silent house with no one to call me mom. One evening, while making dinner just for myself, I saw my reflection in the window pane. I saw an old, hunched-over woman with a tired face and sad eyes. And I wondered at what point I had stopped mattering. At what point my life had been reduced to waiting for calls that only came when they needed money. That night I cried silently, lying in my bed, hugging Robert's pillow. If he were alive, none of this would be happening. He would have set boundaries. He would have protected our savings. He would have protected me. But Robert was gone, and I was alone, navigating turbulent waters without knowing how to ask for help, without knowing if anyone would come to rescue me if I did. The following months were more of the same. Michael and Jessica kept asking, and I kept giving. Until one day, something inside me began to crack. It was during one of those surprise visits they made when they needed money urgently. They arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced, and found the door unlocked because I was in the yard trying to prune some bushes. Jessica walked in first, with that smile that no longer fooled me. "Helen, you look so lovely today." I didn't respond right away. I just watched her as she sat on my sofa as if she owned the place, crossing her legs with calculated elegance. Michael came in behind her, and I could see that expression on his face that I already knew all too well. The expression of someone who's about to ask for something. "Mom, we need to talk to you," Michael said, sitting next to me and taking my hand. His touch felt mechanical, rehearsed. The air conditioning in the condo broke, and the technician says it needs a complete replacement. It's $2,200. It's unbearable over there, Mom. Jessica can't even sleep well. I looked at Jessica, who nodded dramatically, fanning herself with her hand as if she were suffering from heat stroke right at that moment. "It's horrible, Helen. We almost passed out last night." Something inside me stirred uncomfortably. $2,200. That amount represented almost 3 months of my Social Security checks, and they were asking for it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Michael, I don't have that much money available right now. I've already lent you so much these past few months. And—" "Mom," Michael interrupted me, squeezing my hand harder. "You have savings. Dad and you saved for years. I know you have that money put away." I felt a chill run down my spine. How did he know exactly how much money I had? I had never given him specific details about my savings. "Michael, that money is for emergencies, for medical expenses, for—" "And what is this? We're your family. If you don't help us, who will?" Jessica leaned forward with that calculating look that unsettled me so much. "Helen, think about it. You live alone in this house. You don't have big expenses. We're young. We're building our future. Your money is better invested in us than sitting in a bank losing value." I was speechless. Did she just say my money was better off with them than with me? Indignation bubbled in my chest, but as always, guilt arrived faster. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being selfish for wanting to keep that money when my son needed it. "Give me a few days to think about it," I finally murmured. Michael's expression changed immediately. He stood up, dropping my hand abruptly. "Think? You need to think about helping your own son?" "That's not it, Michael. It's just that. Forget it, Mom. I get it. When Dad was alive, he always supported us. But now that he's gone, you've become selfish." Those words cut through me like knives. Michael knew exactly where to strike to hurt me the most. Jessica stood up too, adjusting her blouse with an obvious gesture of annoyance. "Let's go, Michael. Your mother has made it clear that her money is more important than our well-being." They left my house without saying goodbye. I watched them walk away from the window, get into their new car, that shiny car I didn't understand how they could afford if they were supposedly in a financial crisis. I stood there, trembling, feeling the tears begin to roll down my cheeks. I couldn't sleep that night. Michael's words echoed in my head over and over. You've become selfish. Was I selfish? Was it wrong to want to keep the money Robert and I had earned with so much effort? I spent hours staring at the ceiling, debating with myself, until finally, at 4 o'clock in the morning, I made a decision. The next day, I went to the bank and withdrew the $2,200. I sent Michael a text telling him to come pick it up. He came alone that time, without Jessica. When I handed him the envelope with the money, he smiled and gave me a quick hug. Thanks, Mom. I knew I could count on you. Michael, honey, I need you to promise me something, I said before he left. This is the last time. I can't keep giving you money. I'm draining my savings. He nodded, but he didn't look me in the eye. Sure, Mom. I understand perfectly. This is the last time. But it wasn't the last time. 3 weeks later, they called again. They needed money to pay for the car insurance, then for a birthday present for Jessica's mom, then for a supposed oven repair. And every time I hesitated, Michael used the same strategy. He made me feel guilty. He made me feel like a bad mother. He manipulated me with memories of my husband, with promises that we would be a united family again, with poisoned words disguised as love. And I kept falling for it, because I didn't know how to say no without feeling like I was betraying everything it means to be a mother. The months turned into a predictable and painful pattern. They showed up when they needed money. I gave it to them. They disappeared, and the cycle repeated. My savings began to dwindle alarmingly. The account that Robert and I had built over 30 years of work was disappearing at the hands of my son and his wife. But what hurt me most wasn't the money. It was the loneliness. It was knowing that I only mattered when they had a financial need. It was watching my phone day after day without a single call that wasn't accompanied by a request. One afternoon, while organizing old papers, I found a photograph of Michael when he was 8 years old. He was in the backyard, dirty with mud, smiling with that pure happiness that only children have. I clung to that photo and cried. I cried for that boy I had raised with so much love. I cried because that boy no longer existed. In his place was a man who saw me as a resource, not a person. That night I dialed his number, needing to hear his voice, to have even just one normal conversation where we didn't talk about money. Mom, did something happen? He answered, his tone worried. No, dear. I just wanted to know how you were. I miss you. There was an awkward silence on the other end of the line. Oh, well, I'm fine, busy with work. Do you need something? No, Michael, I just wanted to hear your voice. Okay. Hey, Mom, I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you back? Of course, dear. He hung up. He never called me back. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the motionless phone on the table, feeling something inside me harden. Something that had been flexible and compassionate for 74 years was beginning to crack. And with every crack, a small voice inside me whispered something I was terrified to hear. This can't go on. But I wasn't ready to accept it yet. I wasn't ready to set boundaries, because setting boundaries meant risking losing the only family I had left. And that idea terrified me more than anything. So 2 more months passed. 2 months of sporadic calls, of constant requests, of my bank account dwindling uncontrollably, until one Friday afternoon, something changed. Jessica and Michael arrived at my house, unannounced again. But this time it was different. Jessica walked straight into the kitchen, opened my refrigerator as if it were hers, and took out a bottle of water. Helen, we need to talk to you seriously, she said, sitting at the table without being invited. Michael stood with his arms crossed, avoiding my gaze. Michael and I have been thinking, Jessica continued, taking a sip of water. This house is too big for you alone, and it has a lot of value. If you sold it, you could move into a small apartment, easier to maintain, and with the money from the sale, you could help us buy our first house. It would be a family investment. I froze, unable to process what I had just heard. Had she just suggested I sell the house where I had built my entire life to give them the money? This is my house, I said in a trembling voice, feeling the blood rush to my head. I raised Michael here. I lived with Robert here for 40 years. I am not selling it. Jessica let out a dry laugh, as if my answer were absurd. Helen, you have to be practical. Look at this place. The walls need paint, the roof has leaks, the yard is a mess. You're clinging to a pile of memories that are just keeping you trapped in the past. We are your future. Michael is your son. Your grandchildren, when we have them, will be your legacy. I felt a lump in my throat. I am not selling my house. Michael finally spoke, and his voice sounded tired, annoyed. Mom, Jessica is right. You're being stubborn. Think bigger. If you help us now, when we own our own home, you could live with us. We'd have a room for you. You wouldn't be alone. I don't want to live with you. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. I want to live in my house, in the place where I built my life. Jessica slammed the water bottle down on the table. You are so selfish. Your husband is dead, Helen. Those memories aren't going to take care of you when you're sick or need help. We will. But it seems you prefer your pride over your family's well-being. It's not pride. It's my life. Your life, Jessica repeated sarcastically. A lonely life in an old house, waiting for your son to call you. Is that what you want? Because let me tell you something. As long as you keep being so attached to material things, Michael and I have better things to do than come visit you. The silence that followed was brutal. I looked at my son, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, to put his wife in her place. But Michael just stared at the floor, his hands in his pockets, like a scolded child who doesn't want to take sides. Michael, I whispered, are you going to let her talk to me like that? He looked up, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes. Shame? Guilt? I don't know. But it lasted barely a second. Mom, Jessica is just being honest. Maybe you should think about it. I felt as if I had been slapped. My own son, the boy I had carried in my arms, whom I had fed, clothed, and loved unconditionally, was siding with a woman who barely knew me and who only saw me as a resource to be exploited. Get out of my house, I said, my voice firm, surprising myself. What? Michael raised his eyebrows, genuinely surprised. Get out, now. Jessica stood up, grabbing her purse with a dramatic flourish. Fine, but don't come crying when you're alone and sick, and nobody wants to take care of you. Because believe me, Helen, we won't be available for someone who turns their back on us. They left my house, leaving the door open. I sat there in that chair, trembling from head to toe, feeling the tears start to fall uncontrollably. For the first time in my life, I had told them no, and it felt terrible. It felt as if I had committed the worst mistake of my existence. I didn't eat that night. I couldn't. I just sat in the living room, looking at the photographs on the wall, wondering how we had gotten to this point. At what moment had my son turned into someone capable of hurting me this way? The following days were a silent hell. Michael didn't call. He didn't answer my texts. It was as if I had ceased to exist for him. And with every day that passed without news from him, the guilt ate away at me a little more. Maybe I had been too harsh. Maybe I should have listened to their proposal more openly. Maybe I was the problem. But then, something unexpected happened. 2 weeks after that fight, I received a call from the bank. Mrs. Helen? Said a professional voice on the other end. This is David from the bank's security department. We're calling because we detected unusual activity on your account. My heart skipped a beat. What kind of activity? There were several attempts at large transfers in the last few days. They were all automatically blocked by our security system because they exceeded the established daily limits. Did you authorize these transactions? No, I haven't made any transfers. I see. We also noted that someone tried to change your security PIN online 3 days ago. The request was rejected because the identity could not be verified. Ma'am, does anyone else have access to your banking information? The world started spinning around me. Someone had tried to rob me. Someone had my information. And in the bottom of my heart, even though I didn't want to accept it, I knew exactly who it was. Can you tell me where these attempts were made from? I asked in a shaky voice. They were all from a computer registered in the north end of the city. Does that location sound familiar? The north end, where Michael and Jessica lived. Yes, I whispered. It does. Mrs. Helen, I strongly recommend that you come to the bank tomorrow morning to change all your passwords and review your account security. And if you suspect who might have done this, you should consider filing a report. I hung up the phone and sat on the sofa, unable to fully process what I had just heard. My son had tried to rob me, or at least, someone in his house had. The pieces started to fit together in my mind like a grim puzzle. The sudden visits, the questions about my finances, Jessica's insistence that I sell the house. It had all been part of a plan to take everything Robert and I had built. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't cry. Instead, I felt something different growing inside me, something cold and hard. It was rage, pure, justified rage. The next morning, I went to the bank. David, a man in his 50s with a serious expression, met me in his office and showed me all the details of the attempted fraud. They tried to transfer $23,000 in 3 separate transactions, he explained, showing me his computer screen. Fortunately, our system detected it was unusual and blocked everything. But, ma'am, whoever did this had your account number, your date of birth, and your address. This person knows you well. I know, I said flatly. It's my son. David showed no surprise. He had probably seen similar cases before. I understand. Do you wish to press charges? Not yet. I want to talk to him first. Very well. But I suggest we change all your passwords right now and consider blocking any access that isn't in person. I'm also going to activate alerts on your phone for any movement in your account. We spent the next hour setting up new security measures. When I left the bank, I felt different, stronger, more aware, and absolutely determined not to let them steal what was mine. But I still didn't know how far they were willing to go. I still didn't know that the worst was yet to come. That afternoon, while I was making dinner, I heard the doorbell. I opened the door and found Michael standing there, alone, with an expression that was trying to look casual but wasn't fooling anyone. Hi, Mom. Can we talk? I let him in, although every fiber of my being was screaming at me to throw him out. We sat in the living room, and the silence between us was as thick as fog. I know you were at the bank today, he finally said. A chill ran down my spine. How did you know that? Are you spying on me, Michael? No, Mom. It's just that. Look, the bank manager is an acquaintance of a friend of mine. He mentioned you had come in to change all your passwords over a security issue. A lie. It was all a lie. But I decided to play along. Yes, there were attempted fraudulent charges on my account. Michael nodded, trying to look concerned. That's terrible. Do you know who it could have been? I looked him directly in the eye. I have my suspicions. Michael held my gaze for just a second before looking away toward the window. That gesture betrayed him more than any confession. Mom, I came to apologize, he said in a soft, almost childlike voice. I know Jessica and I went too far last time. We shouldn't have pressured you about selling the house. It was insensitive of us. I wanted to believe him. God knows how much I wanted to believe that my son felt genuine remorse. But after the call from the bank, after finding out about the attempted theft, I could no longer be the naive mother who justified everything. Why did you try to access my bank account, Michael? The question landed like a bomb between us. I saw his face turn pale, his hands clench into fists on his knees. I don't know what you're talking about. The bank called me. Someone tried to transfer $23,000 from my account. They tried to change my PIN, and it all came from a computer in your area. From your house, Michael. Mom, that's ridiculous. You're accusing me of trying to steal from you? His indignation seemed so real that for a moment I doubted myself. But then I remembered David's words, the logs, the dates. It all coincided with the visits they had made to my house, with the seemingly innocent questions about my accounts. I'm not accusing you. I'm asking you. Michael stood up, pacing the living room like a caged animal. I can't believe you'd think that of me. I'm your son, Mom, your only son. How could you even suggest that I would steal from you? Because I need to understand what's happening. Because 2 weeks ago, you asked me to sell my house to give you the money. Because in the last few months, you've taken more than $12,000 from me in loans that you've never paid back. Because every time I see you, you only want money. My voice cracked on that last sentence, but I held firm. Michael stopped pacing and looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Was it guilt? Rage? Shame? Jessica and I are going through a hard time. Okay? We have debts. A lot of debts. And I thought that you, as my mother, would want to help us. Helping is one thing, Michael. Stealing is something else entirely. I didn't steal from you. His shout echoed off the walls of the house. It was Jessica, all right? It was her idea. She said you didn't need that much money, that you were just letting it rot in the bank while we were drowning in debt. She accessed your account using your information. I didn't want to, Mom, I swear. The silence that followed was devastating. He had just admitted it. He had just confirmed that my own family had tried to rob me. And the worst part was that he was blaming his wife, as if he hadn't been a part of it. So you knew, I said, my voice barely audible. You knew what Jessica was doing, and you didn't tell me. You didn't warn me. You didn't stop her. Mom, No, let me finish. I stood up, feeling the adrenaline course through my body. You knew, and you let it happen. That makes you just as guilty as she is. Worse, even. Because I am your mother. I gave you life. I raised you. I loved you more than anything in this world, and you repaid me with betrayal. Michael held his hands out to me, tears in his eyes. Mom, please, forgive me. It was a mistake. We were desperate. Jessica's pregnant. Those words should have filled me with joy. I was going to be a grandmother. But in that moment, I only felt emptiness. And you plan to use my stolen money to raise that baby? It's not like that. We just needed a little help to get stable before the baby comes. We were going to pay it all back, I swear. Enough, Michael. I walked to the door and opened it. I want you to leave. Mom, you can't be serious. Leave. Now. He looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and anger. If I leave now, I'm not coming back. Is that what you want? To lose your only son? Your grandchild, who hasn't even been born? Those words were designed to destroy me, to make me give in as I had so many times before. But something inside me had changed irreversibly. If having you in my life means I have to let you rob me, humiliate me, and use me, then yes, I'd rather lose you. Michael stormed out of my house, slamming the door so hard it rattled the walls. And I stood there, in the living room, feeling my legs shake, but refusing to fall. I had set a boundary. I had finally said enough. And it hurt more than I ever imagined. The next few days were the hardest of my life. I didn't get any calls from Michael. No texts, nothing. It was as if I had died to him. I kept getting up every morning, making my coffee, watching the sunrise. But everything felt empty, hollow. I found myself checking my phone constantly, hoping his name would appear on the screen. But it never did. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. It was Jessica. Helen, we need to talk. It's important. It's about your grandchild. My heart leaped. Had something happened to the baby? Despite everything that had happened, the idea of something bad happening to that innocent creature devastated me. I replied asking what was wrong, but she just told me to come to their condo the next day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I didn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned, imagining all kinds of terrible scenarios. When the time came, I got dressed with trembling hands and took a taxi to their building. Jessica opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was wearing a mint green dress that accentuated her barely there baby bump. Come in, Helen. Thanks for coming. I entered the condo and noticed Michael wasn't there. Where's my son? He had to go to work. But it's fine. He knows you're here. We sat in the living room, and Jessica poured me a glass of water I didn't ask for. Look, Helen, I'm going to be straight with you because we don't have time for games. Michael and I are in a very complicated situation. The debts we have are much worse than what he told you. We owe $87,000 between credit cards, personal loans, and some investments that went bad. I was frozen. $87,000. Yes. And the creditors are starting to put on the pressure. If we don't pay soon, we're going to lose everything. The condo, the car, everything. And with a baby on the way, We can't let that happen. And what does that have to do with me? Jessica leaned forward, with that calculating look I knew so well. You have the solution. Your house is easily worth $200,000, probably more. If you sell it and give us half, we could pay off our debts and have something to start over. You'd keep the other half, more than enough to buy a small apartment and live comfortably. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything that had happened, after trying to rob me, they still had the nerve to ask me to sell my house. I am not selling my house, Jessica. Then you're going to lose your son and your grandchild forever. Her tone was cold, threatening. Michael told me to tell you this. If you don't help us, he's going to cut off all contact with you. You won't meet your grandchild. You won't be part of his life. You will die alone in that house, surrounded by memories of people who are gone. I felt as if I'd been punched in the stomach. But this time, instead of folding, something inside me hardened even more. Michael asked you to tell me that. Those were his exact words. I stood up, grabbing my purse with steady hands. Then tell my son that if those are his conditions, I accept losing him. Because I am not selling the house where I built my life to pay for the debts you created out of your own irresponsibility. Jessica stood up too, and for the first time, I saw genuine rage in her face. You are a selfish, bitter old woman. Michael deserves better than a mother like you, and I deserved better than a son like him. I walked out of that condo with my head held high, even though I was falling apart inside. But there was something Jessica and Michael didn't know. Something that was about to change everything. That same afternoon, after leaving Jessica's condo, I went straight to the bank. David greeted me with his usual professionalism, though I could see concern in his eyes when he saw my expression, Mrs. Helen. Did something else happen? I need to protect my money, I said without preamble. I need to make sure that no one, absolutely no one, can access my accounts except me. David nodded and led me to his private office. For the next hour, we implemented additional security measures. I changed all my passwords again. I set up two-factor authentication. I blocked any online transaction over $500 without in-person verification. And most importantly, I added an alert note to my file that required identity verification with a security question only I knew before authorizing any major movement. I also want to open a new account, I told David. An account where I can transfer the majority of my savings. An account that isn't linked to any of my current cards. I can do that, David confirmed. But ma'am, can I ask you a personal question? I nodded. Does your son know exactly how much money you have? The question made me pause. I think he has a rough idea, but not the exact numbers. Good. Then I suggest we keep this new account completely confidential. It won't even appear on your regular bank statements. You'll have to come to the bank for any inquiries or movements related to it. It was perfect. Exactly what I needed. When I left the bank that afternoon, I felt different. More prepared. More in control. But I knew this wasn't over. I knew Michael and I knew Jessica. They wouldn't give up so easily. And I was right. 3 days later, on a Wednesday afternoon, I was watering the plants in the yard when I heard the doorbell. I opened the door and found Michael standing there, alone, with an expression that was meant to be apologetic. Mom, I came to truly apologize this time. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, waiting. Jessica told me what she said to you. She had no right to threaten you like that. I never said I would cut you out of my life if you didn't help us. That was her idea. Lies, all lies. But I let him continue. Look, I know we've made mistakes, big mistakes. But Mom, I'm still your son, and this baby on the way is your grandchild. Are you really going to let our pride destroy this family? I sighed deeply. Michael, sit down. We need to have an honest conversation. We sat in the living room, on the same couches where I had spent so many happy afternoons when he was a boy. It seemed like a completely different life. You and Jessica have $87,000 in debt. Tell me how. How did you get to that point? Michael looked down, ashamed. We were irresponsible. We lived beyond our means. The condo, the car, the trips, the designer clothes. It was all to maintain an image. Jessica works in advertising, and she says we need to project success to be successful. So we spent, and we spent. And when the credit cards maxed out, we took out loans to pay the credit cards. And then more loans to pay those loans. It was a spiral. And my money? The more than $12,000 I lent you? It went to minimum payments, to interest, to things we urgently needed at the time, but now I don't even remember what. I rubbed my temples, feeling the frustration mix with sadness. Michael, I can't solve your financial problems. I don't have that kind of money. And even if I did, giving it to you would only be postponing the inevitable. You two need to learn to live within your means. I know, Mom, you're right, but we need help to get out of this hole. Just one final push, and I promise we will never ask you for anything again. I had heard that promise so many times it had lost all meaning. How much do you need? Michael's eyes lit up with hope. $15,000. With that, we could consolidate the biggest debts and negotiate with the other creditors. I swear, Mom, this would be the last time. $15,000. It was an enormous amount. An amount that represented years of savings, of sacrifices from Robert and me. I don't have $15,000 available, Michael. It was true. Most of my money was now in that secret account I had opened. But he didn't need to know that. But you have savings. Dad and you saved for decades. I know you have more than $50,000 put away. His tone had changed subtly. It was no longer pleading. It was almost an accusation. Those savings are for my old age, Michael, for medical emergencies, for the day when I can no longer take care of myself. Mom, we are your family. When you're old and need care, we will be there for you, but only if you are there for us now. There it was again. The manipulation disguised as logic. The emotional blackmail wrapped in words of family love. Michael, what happens if I give you this $15,000 and in 6 months you're back in the same situation? What happens if you go back to your irresponsible spending? It won't happen. We've learned our lesson. No, you haven't. Because you still think the solution is other people's money, not changing your habits. Michael stood up, and I could see the frustration growing on his face. I can't believe you're being so selfish. Do you know what can happen to us if we don't pay? The creditors can sue us. They can garnish our wages. They can ruin our credit forever. And you, who have the power to prevent it, are refusing to help your own son. I am helping you, Michael. I'm helping you face the consequences of your decisions. Because if I keep rescuing you, you'll never learn. I don't need lessons. I need money. His shout echoed in the house, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Something dark. Something that scared me. I think you should leave, I said, my voice calm but firm. No, I'm not leaving until you promise you're going to help us. Michael, promise me. I felt fear. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own son. I stood up slowly, keeping my distance. I'm not promising you anything. And now, please, leave my house. Michael was breathing heavily, his fists clenched at his sides. For a terrible moment, I thought he was going to do something violent. But then, his expression changed. It softened. And that was even more terrifying. Okay, Mom, I understand. I won't pressure you anymore. He smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. It was the smile of someone who had just made a decision. A decision I didn't know about yet. I love you, Mom. Just remember that. He walked out of my house with slow, deliberate steps. And as I watched him walk away, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something bad was going to happen. I could feel it in my bones. And I wasn't wrong. 2 days later, on a Friday morning, I woke up and noticed something strange. My purse, which I always left on the small table by the entrance, was in a different position, open. With the contents slightly shuffled, I went to check it with a racing heart and discovered something was missing. My debit card, the card linked to my main account. It was gone. I immediately dialed the bank, but it was too early, and customer service didn't open until 9 o'clock. I sat in the living room, shaking, waiting for the hours to pass. I replayed the last few days in my mind. When could someone have gotten into my house? And then I remembered. Michael had been here 2 days ago. He had gone to the bathroom before he left. He was alone in the living room for a few minutes while I was in the kitchen getting water. Enough time to open my purse and take the card. At 9 o'clock on the dot, I called the bank. David handled my case personally. "Mrs. Helen, I'm checking your account right now." I heard the clicking of his keyboard. And then, silence. "David?" "Ma'am, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that someone does indeed have your card and has tried to use it this morning. The good news is that, thanks to the security measures we implemented, all transactions were automatically blocked. There is a pending purchase attempt of $85,000 at a luxury car dealership. $85,000. They were going to buy a car, with my money, with my stolen card. The transaction is on hold because it requires the PIN," David continued. "Without the correct PIN, they can't complete the purchase. But ma'am, this is serious. This is premeditated theft. You should call the police." "Not yet," I whispered. "First, I need to be sure." But I was already sure. I knew exactly who had my card. I knew exactly who was at that dealership trying to steal $85,000 from me. My son and his wife. And what came next would change everything forever. I hung up the phone with David and sat on the sofa, feeling my whole body tremble. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was a mixture of rage, disappointment, and something deeper I couldn't name. It was the definitive death of an illusion. The illusion that my son, deep down, still loved me. That there was still something left of the boy I had raised with so much care. I looked at the clock. It was 9:15 in the morning. Somewhere in the city, Michael and Jessica were at a dealership, probably standing in front of a luxury car, waiting to use my stolen card to buy it. I imagined the scene. Jessica picking out the color, checking the tires, negotiating extra features. Michael filling out paperwork, feigning confidence while inside he knew they were about to commit a crime against his own mother. And then, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered with trembling hands. "Mom," it was Michael. His voice was tense, careful. "Yes, Mom, I need you to do me an urgent favor. It's important." "What kind of favor?" There was a pause. I heard voices in the background, the murmur of people in an enclosed space. "A dealership. I need the PIN for your card, the one with the gold chip. My main card, the one they had stolen from my purse." "Why do you need my PIN, Michael? It's complicated to explain. But trust me, okay? Just tell me the 4 numbers." The audacity was breathtaking. They had stolen my card and were now openly asking me for the PIN, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Where are you, Michael? Mom, please? I don't have time for explanations. Just give me the numbers." "It's 4 simple numbers. Do you remember them?" "Of course I remember them." "Then tell me. Quick." I closed my eyes and made a decision that would change everything. A decision that had been brewing inside me for weeks, maybe months. A decision to end this cycle of abuse and manipulation. 3, I began in a calm, almost whispering voice. I heard Michael repeat the number to someone else. To Jessica, no doubt. 7, another murmur. I could picture them entering the numbers into the payment terminal, holding their breath. 2, yes, Mom. And the last one? 9. There was a moment of silence. And then I heard confused voices on the other end. Someone saying something about verification. Someone else asking to try again. And finally, a scream. Jessica's sharp, desperate scream. "It's not working. It says the card is blocked. Helen tricked us." Michael's voice came back on the phone, now full of panic and rage. "Mom? Mom? What did you do?" I smiled. A bitter, sad smile, but also a liberating one. "I blocked the card 2 days ago, Michael, right after your last visit, when I noticed you had been in my purse." "No, you can't do this. We need that car. We already signed the papers. If we don't pay now, we're going to have legal problems with the dealership. Then you'll have to deal with those problems, because I'm not unblocking it." "Mom!" His scream was one of pure desperation. "Please, you're ruining our lives." "No, Michael, I'm not ruining anything. You ruined your own lives, and you were about to ruin mine, too." I hung up the phone, and for the first time in months, I felt peace. A strange, painful, but real peace. I sat there, waiting. I knew they would come. I knew this wouldn't end with a simple phone call. And I was right. 40 minutes later, I heard the doorbell ringing insistently. Then, pounding on the door, loud, violent. "Mom, open the door. Open it right now." It was Michael's voice, but distorted by rage. I had never heard him like that. I approached the door, but I didn't open it. "Michael, go away. I'm not talking to you right now. Open this damn door." More pounding. So hard, the door rattled in its frame. I heard another voice. "Jessica, you stupid old woman. You're going to pay for this. You made us look like idiots in front of the salesman. They called security. We were almost arrested." I backed away, frightened. I never imagined they would go this far, that their desperation would turn them into people capable of something like this. "If you don't leave right now, I'm going to call the police," I shouted, my voice trying to sound firm but betraying me with its shaking. "Call them. Tell them how you stole from your own son. I didn't steal anything from you. You stole from me. You came into my house, took my card without permission, and tried to spend $85,000? There was a moment of silence. Then, Michael's voice, now more controlled but just as threatening. "Open the door, Mom. We need to talk face to face. Like a family, no. Open it." The blow that followed was so strong I thought the door would break. With trembling hands, I picked up my phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? My son and his wife are at my front door, pounding on it violently. They tried to steal from my bank card, and now they're threatening me. The operator asked for my address and assured me they would send a patrol car immediately. Stay away from the door and do not open it under any circumstances. The pounding continued for a few more minutes. Then I heard arguing voices, Michael and Jessica debating what to do, and finally, silence. I peeked through the window carefully and saw them walking to their car. Michael turned back once toward the house, and our eyes met through the glass. In his eyes, I saw something I will never forget. It wasn't love. It wasn't remorse. It was pure hatred. Hatred for me, his mother, the woman who had given him everything. They got in the car and drove off just as the police car rounded the corner. The officers, an older man and a young woman, knocked on my door professionally. I opened it and told them everything. From the loans they never paid back, to the attempted bank fraud, to the pounding on the door just minutes ago. The female officer took detailed notes while the other officer inspected the door, photographing the marks the blows had left. "Ma'am, this is serious," the officer said. "Identity theft, attempted fraud, threats. Do you want to file formal charges?" That question froze me. Filing charges meant Michael could go to prison. It meant destroying his life, his future, the chances of that baby on the way. But not filing charges meant this would continue, that they would try again, that it would never end. "I need to think about it," I whispered. The officer nodded with understanding. "I understand, but I recommend you at least get a temporary restraining order and keep all the evidence you have. The bank records, call recordings if you have them, everything." They gave me a card with information on how to proceed and left, but not before driving down the street one more time to make sure Michael and Jessica hadn't returned. I was left alone in my house, in that silence that used to seem peaceful but now felt oppressive. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, waiting. I didn't know what I was waiting for exactly. For them to come back? To call and apologize? For this all to have been a nightmare? At 3 o'clock in the morning, my phone vibrated. A text message from Michael. "Mom, I know you're awake. I know you're scared. And you should be. Because what you did today is unforgivable. You humiliated us. You made us look like criminals. The dealership banned us from coming back. And all because of your selfishness. But this isn't over. I know your weak spots. I know your fears. And I'm going to use all of it until you give me what's mine. That money should be mine. Dad would have wanted me to have it, and I'm going to get it, one way or another. You can block your cards, you can change your passwords, but you can't change that I'm your only son, your only family, and sooner or later, you're going to need me. And when that day comes, I'm going to remember this moment. I'm going to remember how you treated me, and I won't be there for you. I read that message 3 times, feeling how each word was like a knife in my heart. My son was threatening me. My own son, the person who had grown inside me, whom I had nursed, whom I had comforted on his worst nights, saw me as an enemy, as an obstacle between him and the money. That morning, sitting in the darkness of my living room, I cried for the last time. I cried for the son I had lost, for the family I would never have, for the broken dreams of an old age surrounded by love. And when I finished crying, something inside me changed, definitively, irrevocably. I was no longer the Helen who sacrificed, who let herself be trampled on for love. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had learned, perhaps too late, that love cannot exist without respect, and that some battles, even if they hurt, must be fought. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months, maybe in years. I made my coffee, sat in the kitchen as I always did, but this time, that crushing weight on my chest wasn't there. I had made a decision during that sleepless night, a decision that terrified me, but one I knew was necessary. At 9 o'clock in the morning, I called David at the bank. "Mrs. Helen, I was just about to contact you. How are you?" "Better than I expected." "David, I need to make several moves today. Can you see me?" "Of course. Do you want to come to the bank? Or would you prefer to talk on the phone?" "I'm coming in. I need to do this in person." An hour later, I was sitting in his office with a list of actions I had meticulously prepared. First, I began. I want to cancel my stolen card and get a new one with a completely different number. Done. Second, I want to transfer 80% of my savings to the secret account we opened. Leave only the basics in the regular accounts. Are you sure? That's a lot of money to move. Completely sure. If they try anything again, let them find the bare minimum. David nodded, understanding the situation without needing more explanations. Third, I continued, feeling my voice grow firmer, I want to make my will, officially, here at the bank. David raised his eyebrows. "Ma'am, for that, you should see a lawyer. We can help you with beneficiary accounts, but a full will. Can you recommend one?" "Yes. I know an excellent attorney who specializes in family and estate law. Her name is Catherine Pierce. Would you like me to get you an appointment? Today, if possible?" David made a few calls while I waited. I looked out his office window, watching people pass by on the street, each with their own lives, their own dramas, and I wondered how many of them were going through something similar. How many families were destroyed over money? How many children saw their parents as resources instead of human beings? "You're in luck," David said, hanging up the phone. "Attorney Pierce can see you today at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll send you the address." Perfect. We spent the next hour executing all the security measures. When I left the bank, I felt like I had put on an invisible armor. I was no longer unprotected. I was no longer vulnerable. Attorney Catherine Pierce's office was in a modern downtown building. She was a woman in her 50s, with short gray hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to read me in seconds. "Mrs. Helen, David briefly told me your situation. I'm very sorry for what you're going through. Thank you. I understand you want to make a will. Are you clear on how you wish to distribute your assets?" "Very clear. I want to leave everything to charitable organizations, specifically an animal shelter and a foundation that helps elderly people in vulnerable situations." Catherine showed no surprise. She had likely seen similar cases. "And your son? You don't wish to leave him anything?" "Nothing, and I want that to be explicitly stated in the document. Not as an oversight, but as a conscious decision." "I understand. Are you prepared for the consequences of that decision?" In many states, children can contest wills, claiming they weren't fairly considered. Let him try. I have documentation of everything that's happened. The bank records of the fraud attempts. The police report of the threats. The text messages. Catherine nodded slowly. "Then let's do this correctly. I will draft an ironclad will with a specific, well-founded disinheritance clause. I also recommend you document everything in an explanatory letter. It has no legal value in itself, but it can help contextualize your decisions if there is eventually a dispute." We spent the next 2 hours working on every detail. When we finished, I had a complete, signed, and witnessed will, fully valid. My house, my savings, everything Robert and I had built would go to help those who truly needed it, not those who demanded it. I left that office feeling strangely free, as if I had taken off an invisible weight I had been carrying for too long. That night, sitting in my living room, I wrote the letter Catherine had recommended, a letter where I explained everything, from the beginning of the manipulations to the attempted theft, from the unpaid loans to the threats. I wrote for 3 hours, letting out all the pain, all the disappointment, all the accumulated rage. And at the end, I added something I hadn't planned. Michael, if you are reading this, it's because I am no longer in this world, and I want you to know something important. I loved you. I loved you with every fiber of my being. You were my reason for living for many years. But love cannot survive without respect. And you lost respect for me the day you decided my worth was in my bank account and not in my heart. I am not punishing you with this will. I am freeing you from the obligation to pretend you care about me, freeing you from having to visit me out of self-interest. And I am freeing myself from expecting something from you that you clearly cannot or will not give. The money you wanted so badly will go to do good in the world, to feed abandoned animals, to care for forgotten seniors, to create something positive from the pain you left in my life. And I sincerely hope, that one day you understand that a person's true value was never in what they could give you, but in who they were. Your father would be devastated to see who you've become. But I, finally, am at peace. Mom. I put the letter in a sealed envelope with instructions for it to be delivered to Michael, along with the will when I died. The following days were strangely quiet. I received no calls from Michael or Jessica. It was as if they had disappeared from my life. And although part of me grieved for that, a larger part was grateful for the silence. One afternoon, while watering the plants in the yard, my neighbor Ruth came over to the fence dividing our properties. Helen, are you all right? I saw police here a few days ago. Ruth was a sweet woman in her 60s who had lived alone since her husband died. We had shared coffee a few times, but we had never been truly close. I'm fine, Ruth. Just some family problems. I saw your son yelling at the door. He looked very upset. Yes, well, things are complicated. Ruth looked at me with those understanding eyes that only someone who has lived can have. My son also asked me for money for years. When I finally told him no, he stopped speaking to me. That was 5 years ago. I haven't heard from him since. And how did you cope with that? At first, it was awful. I cried for months. But then I realized something. I'd rather be alone than in bad company. I prefer honest silence over false words. And I learned to build a life that didn't depend on waiting for someone else to value me. Her words resonated deeply with me. You don't regret it? Telling him no? Never. I regret not doing it sooner, letting myself be manipulated for so long. But the day I set boundaries was the day I became the owner of my own life again. That conversation was like a balm. Knowing I wasn't alone in this, that other women had gone through the same thing and survived, gave me renewed strength. The days turned into weeks. I established new routines. I started going to a book club at the local library. I signed up for a beginner's painting class. I began to rebuild a life that didn't revolve around waiting for calls from my son. And slowly, very slowly, I began to heal. But I knew this wasn't over. I knew Michael well enough to know he wouldn't give up so easily. And I was right. A month after the dealership incident, a certified letter arrived at my house. It was from a lawyer. Michael was suing me. The lawsuit alleged that I had committed reverse parental alienation and that I was illegally withholding funds that rightfully belonged to him as the sole heir. They were petitioning for a judge to order the disclosure of all my financial assets and to establish a mandatory trust where I would deposit a monthly amount for his family's maintenance. It was absurd. It was offensive. But it was real. I immediately called Catherine. Don't worry, she said calmly after reviewing the documents. This lawsuit has no legal standing. You are alive, you are competent, and you have the absolute right to manage your money as you see fit. Your son has no legal claim to your assets while you are alive. We are going to respond to this and request it be dismissed. And if it's not dismissed, then we'll go to trial. And believe me, we have all the documentation needed to win. The bank records, the police report, everything. Your son is digging his own legal grave. Despite her reassuring words, I was devastated. Not by the lawsuit itself, but by what it represented. My son truly saw me as an obstacle to be eliminated, as something to be conquered. There was no longer even a pretense of family love. It was open war. The legal process lasted 3 months. 3 months of hearings, of depositions, of having to relive every painful moment in front of strangers. 3 months of seeing my son sitting on the other side of the courtroom, avoiding my gaze, while his lawyer tried to paint me as a senile old woman who didn't know how to manage her money. But Catherine was relentless. She presented every bank record, every threatening message, every document that proved the pattern of abuse and manipulation. The judge, a man in his 60s with a serious expression, listened to everything attentively, and when it came time for his verdict, his voice was clear and firm. I have reviewed all the evidence presented, and I must say, I have rarely seen such a clear case of familial financial manipulation. Mrs. Helen is a competent woman, in full command of her mental faculties, and has the absolute right to manage her assets as she deems appropriate. Mr. Michael has no legal right to his mother's assets while she is alive. This lawsuit is dismissed in its entirety. Furthermore, I am ordering the plaintiff to pay the defendant's legal costs. Michael shot to his feet, his face red with rage. This is unfair. She's my mother. That money should be for her family. The judge looked at him sternly. Sir, I suggest you sit down and remain silent. Michael's lawyer yanked him by the arm to make him sit. But before he did, Michael looked directly at me. And in those eyes, I saw the end of everything. The end of any possibility of reconciliation. And strangely, I was at peace with that. I left the courthouse with Catherine at my side. We did it, Helen. We won. Thank you, Catherine, for everything. What will you do now? I thought about that question. What was I going to do? For the first time in years, I had total control over my life. I'm going to live, I finally answered. I'm just going to live. And that's exactly what I did. I sold some things I no longer needed and used the money to remodel parts of the house. I painted the walls cheerful colors. I fixed up the garden. I bought new furniture that made me happy. I signed up for more classes. Painting, ceramics, even yoga for seniors. I met other women in similar situations, and we formed an informal support group. We met every Tuesday at the neighborhood cafe to share stories and strength. Ruth became a true friend. We had dinner together twice a week, watched movies, and sometimes just sat in silence in my garden. One day, 6 months after the trial, Ruth said something to me I'll never forget. You know, Helen, when I first met you, I thought you were a sad woman trapped in her past. But now I look at you, and I see someone completely different. Someone who bloomed after the pain. I don't know if I bloomed, I answered honestly, but I definitely survived. That's more than many can say. She was right, I had survived. And not only that, I had learned to live again. I didn't hear from Michael again for months. Until one day, almost a year after the dealership incident, an envelope arrived at my house. It wasn't certified. It had no return address. Just my name, handwritten on the front. I opened it with trembling hands and found a photograph inside. It was an ultrasound. And on the back, written in Michael's handwriting, were just 3 words. Your grandson, James. I looked at that image for a long time. A baby, my grandson. A new life I would never know. Part of me broke in that moment. The part that still held out hope. But another part of me, the wiser, more tired part, understood that this was just another manipulation. Another way to make me feel guilty. I put the photograph in a drawer. I didn't throw it away. But I didn't put it on display either. It was a reminder that some losses are irreversible, and that it's okay to mourn them. But it's not okay to let them destroy you. The months passed. Fall gave way to winter, and winter to spring. Life continued at its steady pace. Some days were good, filled with laughter with my new friends, satisfaction from my projects, peace in my garden. Other days were hard, where the loneliness felt like lead. But even on the hard days, I knew I had made the only possible decision. One afternoon in May, while I was in my painting class, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Mrs. Helen? It was a woman's voice I didn't recognize. Yes, this is she. My name is Samantha. I'm a social worker at Central Hospital. Your son Michael was admitted this morning. There was a car accident. The world stopped. Is he? He's okay. He's stable, but injured. He has a concussion and some fractures. He's going to make a full recovery. The trip to the hospital was a blur. Ruth offered to come with me, and I gratefully accepted. When we arrived, I asked for Michael at the front desk. They directed me to his room on the 3rd floor. I rode the elevator up, my heart pounding so loudly I thought everyone could hear it. When I got to the room, the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open gently and saw Michael in the bed, with bandages on his head and his arm in a cast. And next to him, holding his hand, was Jessica, with a prominent baby bump. Jessica looked up when I walked in. "Helen," she said softly, "thank you for coming." I slowly approached the bed. Michael's eyes were closed. "How is he?" "He's going to be fine. It was a terrible scare, but he'll recover." "I'm the one who called," Jessica said. "I asked them to notify you. Michael told me not to, but I thought you had a right to know." "Why?" The question came out before I could stop it. Jessica looked at Michael, then back at me. "Because when I thought I might lose him, I realized that the money doesn't matter. None of it matters, and that I had helped destroy something that should have been sacred. I don't expect you to forgive me. I know we did unforgivable things. I'm just asking you not to close the door completely, to leave a crack of light." Michael began to stir, his eyes fluttering open. He looked around, confused, until his eyes landed on me. "Mom." His voice was hoarse, small. "I'm here, Michael." "I'm sorry," he whispered, and tears began to fall down his face. "I'm so sorry. I was a terrible son. I treated you horribly." I moved closer, taking his free hand. "Rest now. We'll talk later." "No," he insisted, squeezing my hand. "I need to say it now. I loved you more than anything, and I let money ruin that. I made those decisions, and there's no excuse for it. When the car started flipping, when I thought I was going to die, all I could think about was you, about how I treated you. And I don't want my son to grow up without knowing his grandmother because I was an idiot." I looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes through the pain and tears. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means letting go of the poison that's killing you inside. "I forgive you," I said finally. "But, Michael, things can't be like they were. If we're going to rebuild something, it has to be on a completely new foundation. Respect, boundaries, honesty. Whatever you say, Mom, just give me a chance. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Michael will really change, and honestly, it doesn't matter. Because for the first time, I'm not putting my happiness in their hands. I've learned to build a life that doesn't depend on them valuing me. I can love my son without sacrificing myself for him. I can forgive without forgetting. I can maintain boundaries without ceasing to be a mother." 3 weeks later, Michael got out of the hospital. He came to visit me with Jessica, and we established clear rules. No more money loans, scheduled visits, mandatory family therapy, and above all, brutal honesty. I don't know if it will work, but I'm willing to try. Not for them, for me. Because I deserve the chance to know my grandson. And I deserve to close this chapter knowing I did everything I could. But this time, with boundaries, with dignity, and with the certainty that if something similar ever happens again, I will have the strength to walk away for good, because I am no longer the Helen who let herself be trampled. I am the Helen who learned that self-love isn't selfishness, it's survival. And as I sit in my renovated garden, having coffee with Ruth, watching the sunset, I know that whatever happens with Michael, I'm going to be okay. Because I finally learned the most important lesson. The only person who will never abandon you is yourself. And it's time to treat yourself with the love and respect you always deserved. The phone rings sometimes. It's Michael, asking how I am, sending pictures of the baby. And I answer, cautiously but with hope. A realistic hope, not a naive one. Because I've learned that you can give love without giving yourself away completely, that you can forgive without being a fool, and that sometimes the story doesn't end with a perfect, happy ending. Sometimes it ends with something better. It ends with a 74-year-old woman, sitting in her own house, surrounded by true friends, in charge of her life and her decisions. And that, despite all the pain, is enough. More than enough. It's everything.